Hi there, this is Dennis Velco with OutBüro. You're tuning in to OutBüro Voices, where we have engaging, interesting conversations with LGBTQ professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders from around the world. And today we are joined by Zander Keig. He is a social worker, and I'm going to do as usual and let him talk all about that. Welcome to the show, Zander.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for inviting me on today. So a little bit about me. I live in Orlando, Florida. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Florida and also in California, Kentucky, South Carolina, and Tennessee. So I'm able to do telemental health services across all these state lines. I currently don't work as a psychotherapist. I'm working as a consultant and a coach doing trainings and webinars that are focused on wellness and belonging and inclusion. So that's what I've been doing since August of this year, or excuse me, from 2020.
Oh, okay. And you did mention that you aren't doing psychoanalysis work at this time. So give us a little bit of information about your background and what led you into where you are today.
Absolutely. Well, to go back is, pretty far back to start looking at how I was led into social work is wanting to be of service. That's just been part of my inner drive since I was a child. My father served in the military. All of my uncles served in the military. Therefore, I served in the military. So I'm a U.S. Coast Guard veteran, and that sparked my interest in wanting to do service work on a large scale level, or at least working with military personnel and veterans. And I unfortunately was medically discharged from the Coast Guard. And so that led me astray a little bit. I wasn't too sure what I was going to do now that this career that I had planned on was no longer an option for me. Well, what I ended up doing is going into law enforcement. And so that's also a way to be of service to the community and to the people. And so that's what I did for a number of years, and decided that I wanted to go to college and get a degree and be able to do some different kind of work. So I did a degree in human services originally, and changed over to interpersonal communication, went off to graduate school, studied conflict analysis and resolution. And my game plan at that time was to do mediation, right, in the courts and in corporations, especially during mergers and acquisitions. That was my training. But I was led into a completely different direction, and instead went off to seminary. And so there's this continuation really of wanting to be of service, and trying to figure out in which context, in which setting I wanted to be of service, right? Was it the military? Was it law enforcement? Was it corporations? Now I'm looking at maybe like the church, right? So I went off to seminary, got a master's of theology. And then I found myself actually working in career counseling and vocational guidance, which I actually really love. I have a passion for. And I was in California at the time, and there was a furlough going on for state employees. I was a state employee working at the Employment Development Department with veterans, helping them find and retain work. And as a result of that furlough, it sort of threw me into a financial conundrum that I had to figure out what to do. And I thought, what's next for me? The thing that I landed on was find a different way to be of service that maybe wasn't so reliant on government dollars or grants or things like that. And so I decided to go to school again to get a master's in social work. And I was fortunate that in my social work program, I did an internship at the Department of Veterans Affairs at the Veterans Health Administration, working with veterans in the inpatient psychiatric unit. And that led to getting a job with the Department of Veterans Affairs after I graduated. And so I spent about 5 years with the VA working with homeless veterans. Right. So just a continuation of that service work. I wasn't a psychotherapist. I was a clinical case manager. I then transferred over to the Navy and continued on as a clinical case manager, working with the Navy Medicine West transgender care team. where I was directly assisting 225 sailors and Marines with their gender transition. I'm a trans man, so that's of personal, interest and, for me. And as a veteran, I loved being able to be available and provide my experience and my knowledge of transgender people and military culture. It wasn't until I ended up moving to Florida because of family health issues. And when I did that, I needed to find a different job. And I wanted to continue working with veterans and military personnel. And so I ended up working in a community-based clinic doing psychotherapy with veterans, their family members, and the family members of active duty military, but not active duty military. And I just found that being a psychotherapist was not how I wanted to be as a social worker. It wasn't the kind of social work I wanted to practice. And because of COVID, there are certain limits on the types of jobs that are available right now. And that's what led me into doing the consulting work. It's something I've been doing for many years, just as a side. So now I'm doing it as, my sole focus.
Okay. Well, and in Orlando, I'm also a veteran, so much appreciate that and connected on that with you. I was U.S. Army, and of course, there is a really great veterans system. Of course, Tampa's good, but St. Pete's is amazing. I actually am part of the VA medical system, and if I'm not mistaken, their mental health facilities and so forth is one of the best in the country for the VA. After my divorce at 17 years, I actually utilized those services and had a counselor in some group settings for almost a year, just to help me through transitions in life. And so you're in Orlando, and as you stated, that's for family. So probably can't move to the Tampa, St. Pete, or Miami area where there's large VA centers.
Well, in Orlando, we have the Lake Nona VA Medical Center, which is it's like a brand new facility. It's been built just in the last couple of years. So it's a state-of-the-art VA facility. We have the Lake Baldwin outpatient clinic, which used to be the medical center. So it's a very large outpatient clinic. I've been using the Veterans Health Administration for either supplementary or primary care since 1988. Currently, as a consultant, it's my only source of medical care. I have over the years, I've used the mental health services as well as social work services. And other than one really terrible experience at the VA in San Francisco, of all places, I've had really fortunate experiences, really consistent and reliable and available services. I'm very pleased with the Orlando outpatient clinic here at Lake Baldwin. And a lot of people don't know this, but the VA or Veterans Health Administration in particular has two policies. They call them directives. One is a directive for LGBT veterans, and one is for transgender and intersex veterans. And these directives or policies outline all of the rights and entitlements that LGBT veterans have as patients at VA medical centers and outpatient clinics and community-based clinics. So a lot of people don't know that. There's a whole network of LGBT veteran care coordinators that are posted at usually the large medical centers, sometimes at the outpatient clinics. Every VA healthcare system has at least one LGBT veteran care coordinator that is like a patient advocate, but for LGBT veterans. And all that information is available at the VA's website under the patient services. Somebody can just do an internet search on VA and LGBT and patient care, and they'll find it. They can directly contact their veteran care coordinator for LGBT veterans in their local area.
Oh, well, that's great. I didn't even know that. So I just learned something there myself, but I can echo that I've had nothing but great experiences. But like you, there was one instance, and I just to that particular person who was filling in. Wasn't my regular primary care physician or anything like that, but my primary care physician was off ill or holiday or something like that. And she just was not the warm fuzzy. I had a wonderful experience at the St. Pete facility. Absolutely amazing. I would post selfies afterwards praising them. And in Miami, I'm in Fort Lauderdale, and my primary doctor in Fort Lauderdale is female, heterosexual. But when we sat down and we started, as soon as I indicated I'm gay, we started talking about PrEP. She was like, "Oh, and you're new to town. Oh, and you're an entrepreneur. Oh, you need to meet Dr. So-and-so and his husband and Dr. So-and-so and his husband." And she just was like giving me this laundry list. I'm like, "Oh, that's a lot of names." I said, "How about you just throw a dinner party, or the next time there's a little soiree, add me to the list." She goes, "Okay." And yeah, I've been to one so far. But yeah, so this one person, she was just very gruff, and like she got off the wrong side of the bed. So once I had enough of that, as I said, "Did you not have your coffee today?" And she looked at me and I said, "Something's not right, because I know this isn't your normal you. So I'm going to give you a pass. But otherwise, I would call this probably my worst experience at the VA, and you should know that." And her tone changed from that point forward. I was like,
Yeah.
it was just a really weird experience. Just the way her tone, the way she was speaking to me, and so forth. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but that's not what I'm used to. So well, cool.
Yeah.
So that's really amazing, and I thank you for sharing that about the VA for the LGBTQ veterans out there that may not know that, and even for the general public to know that that's available, I think is very important. And I appreciate you sharing your good experiences at the VA, like I have had. So, in every place you go, I mean, you could go to Starbucks and have one employee who makes a bad experience that day, but it doesn't define the whole company or the whole organization. And, the VA gets a lot of a negative press because people, good stories don't make the news, right? It's only the negative things that makes the news. So I think they get in the general public view, I think they have a very misunderstood. And that's why every time I had my appointments and really great experiences, I would post selfies of myself on Facebook, and then I'd have a few people, or especially this one person would bark back with something negative. And I'm like, "Look, you're not a veteran, and so you don't know. So I'm telling you the good stuff. If you only want to believe the negative news," and I gave that experience, that thing of, the Starbucks example. And he wrote back and apologized. So it's like, yay, gotta stick up for our own, right? So share a little bit.
It's like, speaking as a clinician, or even just as a citizen, right? There are certain people that no matter where they go, they have bad experiences. And I think those people need to be reminded that they're the common denominator in all of those experiences. And that maybe there's something about how they're approaching people, their mindset, their expectations, right? It's like that experience you had with that one provider. It's like, you were like, "I know this isn't how you normally are." And that shifted, right? Whereas a lot of people might just take that experience, walk out, and then think the whole system is broken and tell everybody they know that the system is broken.
Right.
Right. So there's like different ways that we can handle these things. I think it's an unrealistic expectation to go through life expecting that we're going to only have positive and affirming experiences, we are going to run into reality and human nature, right? Which is going to not comply with our expectations. And so what are we going to do as a result? Are we going to lash out? Are we going to take a deep breath? Are we going to assert ourselves? Are we going to retaliate? These are all within our control.
Yes, absolutely. And I like you bringing up the, if you're having negative experience after negative experience after negative experience, or bad relationship after bad relationship after bad relationship,
Yeah.
what's the common denominator? It's you. And, as I quote RuPaul, honey, if you can't love yourself, who's gonna? Right. And so you have to look at yourself and look at some inner growth and explore. And that's quite frankly, too, why I took that time to really dig into myself and utilize the great services at the VA that allowed me to connect with other veterans, which I had not really done, especially to that level, in quite a while, and get some one-on-one guidance and just a different perspective is what I like to call it. And like the counselor that I had, it wasn't like, sit back on a couch and while, she's sitting there and psychoanalyzing me or something, but it was really just me sharing what was going on and her asking a few questions, like, so are you okay with that? Are just various questions that make you pause and think about it. And so at any rate, I thoroughly recommend it. And one thing too that I'd like to make sure that folks know out there, under the Affordable Care Act, under normal circumstances, every veteran does not automatically get coverage under the VA. Okay, so if you have a job and you are not disabled, you have not received any injury or so forth, or you have not served to the point of full retirement to qualify for VA care in retirement, then the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, opened up the VA to allow veterans who earn under a certain amount to be eligible for coverage. And so that is a great resource. So if you happen to be an entrepreneur out there and you are a veteran of the United States government, so I'm talking US here, folks, okay? Because I know this is global. But so in the US, if you happen to be a US veteran and maybe you're self-employed, or maybe you lost a job due to COVID or something, and you're looking at the bills of COBRA. If you're a veteran, you may actually qualify under the Affordable Care Act to receive health care, the mental care, eyeglasses, dental, etc., under the VA. So please check that out. I myself, that's, as a solo entrepreneur, that's how I'm currently qualifying, because I don't have any disabilities or something that would make me otherwise qualify. So just hope everyone hears that who needs to hear it. And we talked all about that because it's what the universe led us to do today. So someone out there is going to benefit from that conversation. So tell us a little bit about what you do now. That was kind of
primarily what I'm doing now is
I would say that was a longer extended history, but because of the VA, the medical and so forth. So really wanted to kind of spend time on that. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about what you're doing now in your telemedicine care.
Absolutely. So primarily what I'm doing now is as a consultant and a coach, doing clinical work still. So what I mean by that is I am leading webinars for an EAP company, so an employee assistance program, right? Most people that are employed with medium-sized and large-size employers have EAPs. So when you're having some challenges in your life around childcare, legal issues, financial issues, mental well-being issues, you can call your EAP and you can request assistance, and they will connect you in, with providers that can provide that assistance free of charge up to a certain number of appointments. And so one of these services that they started offering through this one company because of COVID, because people are all at home, is webinars, virtual webinars, virtual education. They call them psychoeducation trainings. So what I'm doing is I'm presenting over the course of 40 to 50 minutes on topics that have to do with wellness and well-being and mindfulness. So breathing exercises, grounding techniques, sleep hygiene, stress management, conflict management, right? So all to help people learn how to manage, resolve, transform some of the distress that they're experiencing because of COVID, because of lockdown, because of job loss, because of isolation, family disconnection, whatever it is, their social and political leanings, which may be causing them, distress either direction, right? So how to take control of managing that distress. I'm also helping telemedicine companies set up what are called emotional support services for their staff and their patients. So it's like similar to an EAP, but it's for smaller companies that don't have an EAP company that they partner with. So employees of those companies can connect one-on-one with an individual that's more like a wellness coach, not a therapist, where they can talk about some of the issues or struggles they're having and get very practical, what would be considered solution-focused advice or guidance. So it's very short, it's brief, it's targeted, and it's solution focused. I'm also doing some wellness and inclusion oriented webinars for companies. And what I mean by that is, there's a big push right now to enact policies around diversity in the workplace. And then there's the practice of inclusion. And there's this gap in between the policies and the practice. And what's happening right now is because of COVID, because of lockdown, there's an increase in burnout right now, right? A lot of people are working from home where they're managing their job, their family duties, their child's education in some cases, caregiving of somebody with a physical or mental illness condition. So there's a lot of people heading into or already in burnout. And when a person is burnt out, they're not going to be at their best in their job or in their family, in their life period. And so with the lockdown, this sense of feeling like they belong or they're connected to their company is impaired, especially if they've come on board since the lockdown, right? Through the onboarding process. How do you onboard a new employee virtually, right? They're having to figure this out. Companies have been doing it for years, but en masse, they're doing it now. And so many companies were not prepared. They didn't have the systems in place. And so people are feeling disconnected, whether they're onboarding, recently or not. And so if you don't feel like you belong, it impacts your wellness. And if your wellness isn't being taken care of, if your well-being isn't being taken care of, then you're not going to feel connected, right? So it's a relationship connection between these two factors of belonging and wellness. And so I've been doing some trainings on that as well. Also, I'm going to be doing, hopefully in the near future, I'm going to be doing some trainings on adverse childhood experiences, which is something that most social workers learn about. And this has to do with a very large study that says that if you're exposed in your childhood to a particular set of traumatic experiences, it has a direct causal relationship to your health and your lifestyle outcomes as far as addiction and homelessness and obesity and heart disease, diabetes. There's a lot of things that come as the result of having these traumas, whether they be neglect or physical abuse or beratement, whatever it is. There's a scale of 10 of these traumas, and the more that you have, the more dire the consequences are. But The good news, just like PTSD, the good news is that there's treatment. There's the ability to refocus and get a hold of these things that have happened as far as what they've led to, and make some changes, right? So when I was with the VA and the Healthcare for Homeless Veterans programs, right, these were veterans that had experienced a lot of childhood and military trauma. They ended up being chronically homeless with mental illness and physical disabilities and substance use disorders. And it was every single day there were veterans who were getting housed and getting treatment and going on to live very productive, successful, and connected lives. So it's, there's good news at the end, or not at the end, but in the middle of this, trajectory of the outcomes that come with, but if we don't intervene as individuals, or if we don't seek out intervention with professionals, then we're just, we're sort of at the whim of what's happened to us. That's caused, our brains to just not develop properly. That's really what it's all about.
Yeah. And I think that's very important. Well, all of those issues are important, but, as the LGBT community, like I knew at 5 to 6 years old that I had a huge crush on the neighbor boy, right? Who lived across, not direct neighbor, but across the wooded area.
Yeah.
And his father was, I drooled over his father. I mean, I was 5 to 6 to 9 years old, and I was infatuated by his father. Oh my God, gorgeous. But as a child, you get an early sense that that's different, and you may have, like, I grew up in a fairly religious family, and so, I remember sitting down. Of course, I was a teenager at this point, but when the movie The Early Frost came out, one of the first movies that represented HIV and AIDS, and of course, lead character dies. And I remember laying on the floor while we were watching this movie as a family. And as soon as the movie was over, the words out of my father's mouth was, "All those faggots should die." And it's like, at this point, I was 14, but I knew I was different. And I knew I liked guys from 5 to 6 years old. And I knew I had to keep it to myself. But, that was just one instance. And it wasn't always overt, because we didn't have a lot of exposure to people who were LGBT. So I didn't, hear that a lot. But you only have to hear that a few times, or even just once, to have it sink in pretty strongly that you're different and your own family thinks you should die. Right? Pretty.
Yes.
And there's a whole lot more, honey, but I've already dealt with most of that with someone else. But, it's those kind of experiences. That's why 30 to 40% of homeless youth are LGBT. And it's why there is a high rate of suicide, in the trans community, not just, but, there's a lot of that childhood kind of social expectations and conditionings that aren't necessarily the physical violence, such as being physically beaten or raped or, and molested, but it's the mental, the small trickle. It's like, sure, I could hurt you by punching you in the face right now, but there's also that damage when you just go tap, 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 right? It's going to drive you crazy. So, so I think that's very important for the LGBT community and everyone who might be listening, but to know that those are also traumas. If you didn't feel, accepted by your family, if you didn't feel accepted at school, those are things that can, and please chime in or disagree, but those are things that can affect you and how you see the world and how you interact with others, being, maybe disconnected or so forth. Would you like to maybe expound upon that a little bit for our audience?
Absolutely. What I would say is, there's different levels, right? So there's the internalization of the stigma, right? So even if there's nobody in our direct vicinity, nobody in our family is outwardly saying anything prejudicial or discriminatory or hostile towards, LGBT people or rights, we're still going to be exposed to it in different ways in school, in the neighborhood, when we're watching television or the movies. So it's like each person has a different relationship to that stigma. And so for some people, it's going to be very direct. They're going to be verbally abused and or physically abused by family because they're too effeminate as a boy or too, boyish or masculine as a girl, right? It's like direct negation of your personhood, right? When you're going through that. And then some people are going to experience bullying in school that goes from taunting and teasing all the way up to like brutalization, right? And then there are people who are going to be, let's take, you said you were raised in a religious family. I'm a seminary graduate. I know a lot of LGBT people who are very strongly people of faith. And so how do they reconcile that? How do they navigate that desire to be a person of faith that's possibly connected through childhood to a particular religion or denomination that rejects them, that denies them, that ostracizes them, that kills them, right? Depending on the religion and place in the world, right? So how do they do that? Do they abandon it altogether, which a lot of people do, and become, espoused atheists, or they take on perhaps Buddhism, thinking that it's much more enlightened when that's not necessarily the case. When you look at the different ways in which Buddhism is practiced around the world, it's not the same as the sort of mindfulness meditation kind of Buddhism that we have here in the United States. So how do we do that? Do we have to renounce our Judaism, or do we just leave maybe orthodoxy and go into reform? Do we renounce our Christianity, or do we move out of the Pentecostal church into perhaps the Unitarian church or the United Church of Christ, right? Like or the Quakers, right? Like there are multiple options. And some people are going to be raised in a family where they just have to disconnect from that family. It's been too damaging to them. And other people, they find a way, right? Like, I don't know what your relationship is with your father now, if your father is living, but my hope is, and what I've seen happen time and time again, is that family members, quote, they come around, so to speak, right? They become more educated, they become more attentive, they become more sensitive to these issues, and they get over. And in a lot of cases, I've noticed is that people make those kinds of statements like your dad did. I've met people who make statements like that, and quite honestly, it's not where their heart is. It's fear, it's confusion, they think people expect them to say those things or do those things. I mean, in my 20s, I met a neo-Nazi skinhead who was a gay guy who was self-loathing and beating up gay guys, right? Who had to come to terms with that, reconcile that, what he had done and why he had done it, and come out on the other side of it, and embrace himself, and make amends for that, those behaviors, those actions that he took. So, we're all work in progress,
Yeah, well, we are all a work in progress. That is for sure. And, if you're not changing and growing, you're dead, right? You're stuck. And so, and, normally I have, folks on that have, are entrepreneurs and they talk about, I would go, okay, so how can people get, contact you for, a therapy help? But, what are some of the ways, but you work for a company or do you do private practice? I don't think we talked about that.
I don't do private practice in the traditional sense of as a psychotherapist, right? Offering therapy sessions where I'm following, a cognitive behavioral therapy modality. What I do is I do coaching. So if people have particular things that they want to work on, if there are issues that they're having, that they want to figure out solutions for, let me just give you an example. When I was doing psychotherapy, and even as a clinical case manager, I can tell you that there were 3 primary issues that every single person I worked with was dealing with, regardless of the specifics of their life. They weren't getting good sleep. They weren't engaging with other people enough, right, to feel connected. And they were anxious or ruled by their negative thoughts, right? The what ifs or the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, or, these things. And so those are actually fairly simple, not easy, but they're fairly simple things to take on, right? If you're not sleeping well, go on the internet and look up sleep hygiene and make some changes to your day and see if that works, right? Because if you don't get enough sleep, then you're not getting into REM. If you're not getting into REM, you're not dreaming properly. And if you're not dreaming properly, then you're not putting your memories from the front of your mind to the back of your mind. And that's the problem with PTSD, with veterans, right? And with other people with PTSD, is that when you're not getting proper sleep and you're not processing your emotions, completely, then you live in constant fear and trepidation and alarmism and alert, right? You're constantly on alert. You hear all those stories about, veterans who have to sit with their back to the wall so they can see the door. And, somebody who has processed the emotions and the actions, that's not a necessary behavior to take on, right? So it's getting good sleep, practicing mindfulness or grounding techniques, and also finding a way to connect with individuals in helpful ways that make you feel connected to something bigger than yourself, whether that's a social group or a church group or a family, group, whatever it is, or as social beings, right? This need to connect to something bigger and than us is like an internal drive that we have.
Oh, I definitely can understand all those points. And, whenever
yes. So I basically help people with that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. And whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed, I tend to keep a lot in my head, but being what's called a Scrum Master, I learned a great trick. Scrum Master is in product management. And so whenever because I would tend to kind of keep stuff in my head, and then it's like, oh, I got to think about this and I got to do this tomorrow. My trick is I get up and I write it down. And so then I know I won't forget it, because a lot of my anxiousness and so forth would be, oh, I have to do this and this and this tomorrow. And oh, will I forget anything? And then I'd try to burn it in my brain so I wouldn't forget. And I don't know why it took me a long time, but writing the things down, even if tomorrow I look at it and I go, oh, well, that's not needed, and I throw the piece of paper away, at least it released me. I'll also share with you, sharing these so folks might have tips, is I listen to kind of meditative binaural beat music to relax. I will admit, I also do listen to some self-guided hypnotherapy stuff on YouTube. And, for deep, relaxing sleep, I've done kind of sleep meditation for numerous years. And I don't do that every night, just every now and then, especially if I'm going through a lot. And I do walk.
Well, but that's the thing, right? Is that you discovered the techniques that work for you, right?
Yeah.
And so it's for some people to trial of, you have to try several things to find which technique is going to work for you.
Mhm.
But a lot of people are just unaware of that it's a technique, that it can be as simple as that, right? That I put in headphones that have ocean sounds in them, and then I can do my work, right? I have ADHD, so that gives me the opportunity that takes my mind sort of, it takes any distractions away, and I can hyper focus even though I've got that wave sound in my ears. That works
Right.
for me. For other people, that would definitely not work, right?
Right. Right. Absolutely. And one of the things too, as just a technique for social is, you think you don't have a lot of time in your life, but think about how much time you might spend watching YouTube, watching TV, and so forth, and think about maybe that
Yeah.
there's a community service, a nonprofit in your area that you could get involved with and volunteer at, to have both a sense of community that you're giving to the community and you're meeting new people. I have moved around quite a bit in my life, and with COVID, I can't right now. But one of the, and because also I'm visiting family for extended period. But when I get back to Fort Lauderdale, one of the things I'm going to be doing is joining a few social organizations. The LGBT Chamber of Commerce. There's a few others. There's a great um, um, thrift store that supports people with HIV. And so, and I know some people who volunteer there, and I thought, well, and they've been encouraging me. So just for you, for information out there, you might not think you have time right now in your life for that, but it's because you're not making the time. And if you are feeling disconnected, you have to make the time, especially in the world we live in now, is to carve that time out and seek out those opportunities to feel that connectedness and make that happen in a safe way, obviously, with COVID and so forth. But so great tips. Now, if someone were wanting to, now obviously we're going to have in our show notes links to your OutBüro profile. But if someone was wanting to get your coaching help, how would they, outside of OutBüro, is there any particular way that you would like them to reach out to you on?
Sure. My website is Zander Keig, so ZanderKeig.net. And on my website, there's a form that can be filled out. And once it gets filled out and submitted, it comes right to me, and it tells me who you are and what it is you're looking for. And the first time we connect, there's no charge for that. So just a way to meet each other and figure out, if it's a good fit, if what you're looking for is what I can do, and whether we sync together. That's a really important feature, is to be able to have good rapport with the people that you're working with. At least for me, I'd rather work with people that I have good rapport with than not.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was one of the things when I was, with the VA in St. Petersburg. That's where this person who was a new a therapist counselor at the VA, totally new to the VA, and obviously the new to the St. Pete VA. Just cute little blonde woman, married with kids and so forth. But I just liked she was leading the groups that I had joined, kind of group settings, and I actually approached her because there were a couple other counselors who would come in and kind of lead the groups, but then she came in and started kind of to take over, and I just connected with her. I just liked her. I liked her personality. I thought she was very mindful and empathetic, and very articulate as well. And I actually approached her. I'm like, I don't know if it's possible, but could I possibly see you on a one-on-one basis, just to delve a little bit more? I'm like, the group setting is great, but there's more things going on in my life. I would like a little bit more personal one-on-one. And she's like, oh, absolutely. and it was, it was that rapport. The other people were fine, but I just didn't have that same level of connectedness with her. So I can, from my own personal experience, confirm that is very important, and appreciate you mentioning that. Well, before, I know we're almost out of our time here. So is there any last words before we head off?
Well, I just wanted people, for those who are watching that are in the military or veterans, or if you have a loved one, a partner, a child that's a veteran, if they happen to also be LGBT, there are some really great organizations out there for support and for networking, and also for advocacy work. If you run into an issue at the VA, you can contact the Transgender American Veterans Association. I was on the board of directors for 5 years, and most of what we did was help connect that veteran into the LGBT Veteran Care Coordinator or the LGBT Patient Care Services team at the central office to get them the services that they're entitled to. So that's transveteran.org. There's also the American Veterans for Equal Rights, which is an LGBT veteran organization at aver.org. And then there's the new Modern Military Association of America, with 3 different organizations merged last year, mmaa.org, I believe it is. And so they're a very large organization made up of individuals who are active duty and veterans, and their partners and their dependents, right? So it's a very large organization now. A lot of people might remember OutServe and the Service Members Legal Defense Fund. And so those are 2 of the organizations that merged to make MMA, Modern Military Association of America. I also want to let people know that I do mentoring. So if you're a social worker, a social work student, I do mentoring with social work students and early career social workers, and also with trans men who are early in transition. I do a lot of mentorship. So that's something that I do just as a hobby, so to speak. I have greatly benefited from mentorship as a social worker and throughout my transition, which I started almost 16 years ago now. So medically speaking, and so I that's my way of giving back to those 2 communities, is by now becoming a mentor for others.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. I appreciate you bringing that up. So if you've not yet created your OutBüro account, when you do, be sure to join the Trans Action group.
I have.
Oh, okay, wonderful. It's small, but growing. So it's nice to know that,
Yes.
and on your profile, you're able to indicate that you're a mentor and what areas you'd like to be a mentor on. So much appreciate you bringing all that up, and we'll make sure we get all the links to those organizations that you mentioned in the show notes so that people will have those to reference. Well, Zander, it's been a fantastic conversation with you. As always, our first conversation was absolutely delightful, and I appreciate you taking time out of your day and your week to chat with us today.
Absolutely, Dennis. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for all the work that you're doing and for starting the OutBüro. And I'm happy to be on the platform, and I'm really looking forward to networking with other members of the platform and seeing what we can do together, because I think that collaboration is really what makes us more successful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone, for staying tuned to this episode of OutBüro Voices. We appreciate you. And to be sure that you get informed of future episodes as they become available, be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button on whichever application that you're watching or viewing this on. We appreciate you. So join OutBüro.com today. It's where you belong. I'm Dennis Velco. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.